Tell us a little bit about what you saw and being able to relay that message to Cora when you watched Kimbrel pitch and kind of help out so he wasn't tipping his pitches.
So tipping pitches, we hear about it all the time.
People at home understand what tipping pitches is all about.
It's amazing.
And that's remarkable.
Alex, coming into this recording, I was really excited because I thought we were going to have a lot to talk about. But thought back on this week, a lot of news, a lot of conversations online and in real life about Major League Baseball. And then as I started listing out the topics in my head, started writing them down in a note on my phone, I realized most of those topics are banned from this podcast. And I can't just blame you this time, because one of the things that I really wanted to talk about was an article in The Athletic by Evan Drellich talking about a speech that Commissioner Rob Manfred gave, but the topic of that speech was also banned. So I have to look inward. I have to blame myself as well. So I think on this podcast, instead of discussing baseball, I think what we're going to do is we're just going to play a recording from karaoke on Friday night. You and me,
good,
all the songs that we sang.
Right. We did the new Boy Genius album front to back.
Right. They probably amount to about an hour and 20 minutes. That's the normal episode length for Tipping Pitches. Not going to be the 2-hour pod that seemingly everyone on earth wants.
I know.
Except you and me.
What are we, Taylor Swift?
So we'll see you next week, I guess.
Baseball's back, Bobby.
Yeah, baseball is back. Is that exciting to you?
I think so.
Have you watched all of the A's games so far?
All two of them. I actually have, yeah.
Nice. How are you feeling? Kyle Muller.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's your Cy Young right there. They call him Kyle Eckersley Muller,
It really messes with my head because we have a friend named Kyle Miller.
Yep.
So it just looks like a
wow,
typo.
I can't believe you're doxing his real-time assassination coordinates.
Speaking of assassination coordinates, I saw that the New York Times lost their check mark today, but I still got mine. We're going strong.
What's the assassination coordinates tie-in?
Like just Twitter.
Okay.
Just Elon general behavior.
I was like, are you about to divulge a long-standing beef
with the New York Times?
The New York Times? I mean, you probably could.
So the A's. 85 wins this year?
I mean, they are on pace for 500 ball.
That's right.
That's big. That's big.
We don't know what they're going to do tonight, though, by the time this podcast publishes. In that case, they could be on pace for like 50
700
wins.
ball. Yeah.
Oh, I went the negative route and you went the positive route. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. We have a lot of fun stuff to talk about that is not banned from this podcast. And you know what? If we run afoul of the banned topics, what's going to happen? Someone going to show up here? Someone going to shut the podcast recording down? I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. We're going to talk about just opening day, the season coming back, a few quick hit thoughts, topics about baseball being back. And then, of course, we have the highlights from the Minor League Baseball collective bargaining agreement, which was tentatively agreed to earlier this week, ratified by the minor leaguers on Friday, and has gone to vote with the major league owners. So we're waiting to hear back on what they vote. Seemingly they are going to vote yes. And we're going to discuss all of that. But before we do, I am Bobby Wagner.
I'm Alex Faisley.
And you are listening to Tipping Pitches. Do you want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere, and even earn money. All in one place, for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters. And Alex, how does it work?
I'm so glad you asked, Bobby. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer. So no matter what your setup's like, you can start creating today. And then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard.
With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Spotify for Podcasters is where we host our podcast, and it is super easy to use. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Alex, new patrons this week. Jake, Tuck, Emma, Alix, Nick, Declan, and Max.
Big week.
Big week.
Something
It's
happened?
opening day. You know, people want to talk about opening day. Not a member of the Alex Hive, but Alix, Alix. Could be pronounced Alex, but I know someone else who has the name Alix and they pronounce it Alix. So I'm just powering through.
Yep.
I'm now drawing great attention to the fact that I am pronouncing it wrong, if that is in fact the wrong pronunciation. But I needed to point that out because it just seems like every week there's a new Alex or Alex adjacent name in the Patreon, and I just don't know what's going on there. It's like statistically improbable at this point.
We've been doing a lot of canvassing of like adjacent names in.
Do you have
other
like a
group chats.
long list, you know, of like the addresses of everybody named Alex in the United States or in the major cities of the United States?
Well,
So
we
you
also
just knock
have
on their
Als.
Als.
We have Alberts. Actually,
Alberts.
I think that one got snuck in there. I think because I played an Albert in like the 7th grade musical.
Oh yeah.
So I get to kind of claim that one.
What musical was that?
Bye Bye Birdie.
Bye Bye Birdie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not familiar with the content of that one. What was your performance like? Were you in character on set? Like Daniel Day-Lewis?
Yes, I was. Yeah, it was a little Marlon Brando method acting.
Right.
I think that's set in like the mid 20th century, so I had my like transatlantic accent going on the whole time.
Your transatlantic accent has come up a lot on this podcast.
Apparently,
somehow.
big accent guys over here.
Well, I'm not going to not ask you to do it now. Do you want to do the transatlantic accent?
No, I don't.
You don't want to call these 4 baseball games that you're watching while we're trying to record this podcast in the transatlantic accent? Mark Canna just singled up the middle. You want to do transatlantic accent, Gary Cohen?
I know. I really shouldn't have brought it up.
Alex, baseball's here. How you feeling?
I'm good, man.
Yeah.
Every year, I think I don't realize how much I missed it until it's back. And then I can't imagine my life without it. That's evidenced by the fact that there was baseball all day long on opening day. And then the next day there was none, right? And I know you have a rant that you'd like to get to, and I want to give you space for that. But generally speaking,
we might as well just do it right now. We might as well.
Hey man, speak on it.
It's second on the list of things that I want to talk about, but since you brought it up, I'm just going to do it right now.
Okay.
The schedule makers, they need to be put to trial.
We need to reel them in.
What is happening?
Mm-hmm.
Who made this schedule? First of all, okay, everybody's playing everybody. That is like a qualitative choice that they made. That we're going to increase interleague play. Everybody's going to play everyone at least once throughout the season, which means you'll be playing your division rivals less, which, I mean, I knew that was a thing that was happening. I don't think I really internalized that meant that for like long stretches of the season, like months of the season, the Mets will not play anyone in the NL East, which is just weird. Like that's a pretty drastic change to the flow of a season, like not seeing your rivals as frequently because of the way that the schedule has worked. The opening day thing is like, this is just picking nits, honestly, which, you know, we love to do on this podcast. But the fact that you have baseball all day on Thursday from 1 p.m. Eastern till 1:45 a.m. Eastern, 12 and a half straight hours. And then the next day, just no baseball until 7 p.m. Just nothing.
Yep.
It's like, here, we gave it all to you yesterday. Now just back to your regularly scheduled programming on Friday afternoon. Like I was trying to fuck off work at like 2, you know, and I just stuck around and kept working because I had nothing else to do.
Incredibly rude of Major League Baseball to make you do that.
And on my birthday, no less.
Mm-hmm.
And on my birthday.
Even worse.
And the Mets shit the bed and lost 2-1 to the Marlins. Finally, the first game that came on was the Mets and Marlins. You know what they did? They promptly lost. So those are my thoughts on the schedule. Actually, the Mets are opening the season with a 4-game series against the Marlins. And then they play the Marlins for a 3-game series again next week. And then they don't play the Marlins again till like August. The Phillies opened their season. The Phillies opened their season in Texas.
Yeah.
Against the Rangers.
I know. I'm watching Cardinals Blue Jays right now, which maybe they're rivals in nature.
The Giants opened their season in Yankee Stadium. What is happening? I mean, I'm definitely going to sound like a crank no matter how I frame this, but why are we doing interleague play on opening day?
Yeah, what happened to tradition?
What happened to just like common sense?
Yeah, we used to be a society.
Why wouldn't everybody start with a series against their division? Why not?
I mean, I guess Technically not possible because all the divisions have 5 teams.
Whatever.
But
so a series against their division, and then like the odd man out, you do sort of like more geographically sensible decisions. Like just starting the season in Yankee Stadium for the Giants, it just doesn't make sense. It's just not right.
Gotta say, that's actually kind of a funny one, given what transpired this offseason surrounding the Giants and Yankees. That's the one I'm kind of okay with.
And then Aaron Judge homers on the first swing that he takes in
Like,
2023.
Come on.
My other thoughts from opening day, Alex. Incredible news dump by the New York Mets to announce that Justin Verlander was going to begin the season on the IL with a strain of his teres major.
That's a body part
Not-
I knew we had.
Well, I mean, I'm familiar with the teres minor, but the major was really the one that I don't know as well.
All right.
I don't. Me and the minor, we go way back, but the teres major,
Right.
we don't know each other that well.
I mean, the major one is far more upbeat and like happy than the minor one, right?
Right,
That's
yeah.
much more somber, I think.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And the Mets opening day game was at 4. And so they announced it a couple hours before their game, right around the time that the rest of the games were starting. So they were really just trying to bury that. There's no way that they found out that he had this strain on Thursday morning.
Right.
Just why does this shit have to happen?
I can't answer that for you.
The Mets have already lost Edwin Diaz for the year, Bryce Montes de Oca for the year, Jose Quintana till late July, and now Justin Verlander is starting the season on the IL. I know his thing is like minor, and supposedly he's going to throw still, and he should be
I
back
thought it
in
was
like
major.
a week and a half. Boo!
No, come on.
That was pretty good. It's just bad vibes. Bad vibes for them to start the season.
Yeah. The Mets are back, baby.
They're back.
Come on. What did you expect?
Do you want to talk about John Angelos?
Yes, before we do though, there's one thing
Okay.
I want to bring up. And I suppose it's a good thing that we didn't ban this.
Your whole facial expression just changed.
Well, I know that with the return of baseball, we get the return of sports betting. I understand that that's kind of part and parcel of things at this point.
Uh-huh.
But it just bums me out the way that it has wormed its way into every aspect of the sports culture. I mean, every single aspect.
Yep.
Right. I love employing MLB TV's quad game view, right, where you can watch 4 games at once. And having 4 games.
No free ads.
I know. Yeah, I know. And
Wait, speaking of no free ads, actually, let me give a free ad really quickly. If you have T-Mobile, you can get MLB TV for free still for like another day when this podcast posts, which means that you won't have to give $150 or whatever to Rob Manfred. So please do that. Anyway, back to your point. No free ads. Let me do this T-Mobile ad read.
It's just such a bummer to have 4 games up and see 4 different like sports betting ads, like you know, on each
time.
one,
Yeah.
or like tuning into one and one of the broadcasters is reading like the over under on the run line for the game, like reading out loud saying the over under is set at 8.5. Make your bets now. Get a $100 free bet. Or whatever, right? They've added odds to the MLB home run alerts. Like
Oh, that one was the one that really sent me into a rage.
Yes.
The MLB home run account like got a sponsorship to put the odds for, I guess that home run hit that day.
Right. That Aaron Judge would hit a home run right there. The odds were 500, like
that's like that already happened. That doesn't help you.
Right. Like, what is the context?
That's old news at that point. It's just so dumb. Did you see that? Speaking of CBAs, did you see that the NBA signed their new collective bargaining agreement also this past week?
Yeah.
Part of that collective bargaining agreement was that players in the NBA now have the ability to, quote, invest in NBA and WNBA teams, as well as promote and or invest in sports betting and cannabis companies, according to Shams Charania. What does that mean? So like LeBron can buy a stake in the Clippers?
Right. And Bally.
And Bovada.
Right, exactly.
And I don't know the name of a weed company, but like, why? Why don't we just share more of the revenue? He has to buy into the ownership group of his own team to get more of the revenue? Like, I don't really understand that.
Right. You're saying his name a lot, and I have to think that he's someone who had a pretty big hand in this.
Definitely.
Right? Who like wants to invest in the new Las Vegas expansion franchise, right? And like
I don't
set
think
up
he
his
wants to invest in it. I think he
Well,
wants to completely own it.
Own it. Yes, exactly.
Yes. I think that team will not happen until LeBron retires.
Exactly. Yeah. We're so
That's
far
LeBron
past
James,
the
owner of
Rubicon.
the Boston Red Sox, to you, by the way.
Jesus Christ. Don't remind me.
Yes, we're past the Rubicon. How is that not a conflict of interest?
I can't tell you.
In the NFL, they suspended a player for like 2 years because he bet on a game. You know? Isn't there like minor leaguers who have been suspended for betting on games too?
Yeah.
We're back in my I'm just saying things like stories that I kind of remember era, but I don't
Didn't
really
it
know if
happen?
that's true. I feel like that happened.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just as you say, like we're asking for conflicts of interest at this point, and like we're only at the beginning of this too. And if you want to bet on sports, more power to you. Doesn't affect me in any way whatsoever. But don't shove it down my throat. You know.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, we are living in an era of one big conflict of interest. Everything is a conflict of interest because everything is owned by the same people.
Right.
So,
I mean, in that regard, there's really no conflict of interest then.
The interests are all out in front of you.
Right, exactly.
If you look hard enough. Okay. John Angelos time. I think that's a phrase that we will say a lot on this podcast. Should we have like a little music for him? Like anytime we're going to talk about John Angelos, we drop a little soundbite in there, a little bumper. Should I create something?
Yeah, I think you should. Or if one of our intrepid listeners would like to, they really rose to the occasion when asked to write a Bob Castellini jingle.
Well, at this point, if we just keep this bit going, we'll have a jingle for every single owner. Anytime they come up, we'll just, all right, it's time to play the Angelos song.
Right. Right. John's theme.
John's theme number 3.
Yeah.
You know, like it's like the third one that the person
Right.
came up with. You're like, what happened to number 1 and 2?
Right. Moreno Sonata number 5.
Moreno Sonata. That's so good. I would like one for Artie. I feel like that name lends itself well to a little jingle.
It does.
See, I love the Castellini one so much, but we just don't get to do it enough.
I know.
He's got carrots and lettuce and mushrooms, porcini, the vegetable king, Bob Castellini.
If someone wants to come up with something, then that's great. If not, I'll make my own little jingle. John Angelos.
John Angelos, man of the hour.
John Angelos was being interviewed by 1070 The Fan, which I believe is the official radio partner of the Orioles. I think that they do the radio broadcast for Orioles games, and so that's why he has like either a standing interview with them, or like that's why he was being interviewed by them around opening day. And he was asked about the time like 3 weeks ago when he volunteered to open the books to the Baltimore Orioles for press if they wanted to. This wasn't actually 3 weeks ago. It was in February for Martin Luther King Day, if you'll remember. And he was like, this is an inappropriate question to ask me on this day of all days, MLK Day. And so people have been wondering, and this is kind of like the first interview that he has done since then, other than like a few days ago when he was like, we probably won't be able to extend Adley Rutschman, which was cool. That was a cool thing he did. And he was asked about whether or not he was still open to giving a little bit more insight into the financial state of the Baltimore Orioles. And
I'd like to point out, he volunteered this too. It was not like reporters came to him and
Yes.
said, will you open the books today? I mean, I'm sure, it came up and it's something that every reporter is interested in, but he said, you can come down tomorrow. I won't talk about this today, but come down here tomorrow and I'll open every last page.
well, so he was being asked if the Orioles were going to stay in Baltimore, basically, because their lease is expiring. They chose not to opt into an extra 2 years or 5 years or whatever for the lease at Camden Yards because, if you read between the lines, what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep that card on the table to threaten the city of Baltimore to try to get more money, more public funds for updates and improvements that need to be made to Camden Yards and the surrounding area. So he was basically being asked about that and whether the team is financially solvent enough to be able to take care of some of these things on their own if Baltimore decides not to give them money. And that's when he was like, well, I don't want to talk about this right now. I'm not talking about the Orioles leaving. You can come look at the books tomorrow. If we can, I can answer questions about that tomorrow. You come down to Camden Yards and we can do that then. So yes, like you said, he volunteered this information. And then when a radio host followed up about this on opening day, he was like, it's an interesting concept. And I saw
Hang on. What a bar. Whenever someone asks me if I'm going to complete the thing I said I was going to do, and I say it's an interesting concept. That's fascinating to me.
Hey, Bobby, do you have that edit for me? Well, that edit is an interesting concept.
What is to have?
Could you use that in a sentence? It's an interesting concept, and I saw that my good friends at the Baltimore Sun wanted to weigh in on that today. When the hedge fund that owns the Baltimore Sun, based in New York City, wants to open their books, I guess we'll take a look at that. It's difficult for me to understand what the fascination is. I will say this, there are a lot of teams in the Baltimore-Washington metropolitan area that are for sale. We might be the only one that's not. And I might be the only control person and managing partner that is a Maryland resident, pays taxes in Baltimore City. I would love to see his tax returns. So is he volunteering his tax returns? We'll look at those, prove it. And in the state of Maryland, and has spent every day of my life living inside the city. So he's referring to, I guess, the journalists that were asking him originally about whether they would open the books and weighing in on the fact that he basically has gone silent on that front.
Right. There had been an article in the Baltimore Sun that had come out just a day or two before that basically said
Remember when
missed every single self-imposed deadline. Right. Remember when he said he was going to do this and then didn't?
And then he's weighing in being like, well, will the hedge fund that owns the Baltimore Sun open their books? It's like, do you think that the journalists writing that wouldn't want to see the hedge fund's books too?
Yeah.
Like, that's
Remarkable
a total misdirection.
Like,
yeah, exactly. That's like when someone says, Bobby and Alex, why won't you do a 2-hour podcast? And I'm like, well, have you seen how many 2-hour podcasts are being done by Joe Rogan?
Right. Why don't you do a 2-hour podcast? It's like, because I'm not a podcaster.
So the feigning surprise at the fact that there's public interest in wanting to see a Major League Baseball team's books. My question is, why is he doing this right now? Like, in your honest estimation, now that the Orioles rebuild is somewhat on the upswing, and they're actually seeing some of these prospects who they intentionally tanked and cost these insane cost-cutting measures, very similar to the Houston Astros, because the person at the helm of the Baltimore Orioles is the same person who was in the front office of the Houston Astros, Mike Elias, putting into effect a lot of these practices and strategies and philosophies. And now that those players are finally starting to come up and there's like wider public interest in the team and what they're actually going to do with this, and whether they're going to invest to build out the rest of the roster, whether they're going to invest to keep the Orioles in Baltimore, these outstanding questions, which I don't feel like are like the question of whether the Orioles are going to leave Baltimore. It's not like they're the most likely team to leave their city right now. But typically, if there's a lease that's expiring, it's a fair question, and then the owner will shut it down, or the owner will keep the door open and invite more questions, which is what Angelos did. But my question for you is, why is, after years and years and years of him doing almost no interviews, why is he suddenly trying to be the aggro antagonistic owner of the year, more or less? Why is he trying to fit into the shoes that the Castellinis fit into last year?
I mean, I think there's a couple things at play here, right? He recently took over as the point person in the Orioles ownership group, right? Because of his father's health issues. And in addition to that, right, there was this kind of long-standing internal legal dispute among the Peter Angelos' kids, right, about who would have control over the team, right? And that recently got settled as well. So I think there's a little more clarity on that front as to what the management structure of the franchise looks like going forward. And I think Angelos is probably, well aware of the reputation that the Orioles have cultivated over the last decade or so. And in his mind, this is probably his way of reclaiming that narrative, right? And saying, we're not the cheap, joke of a franchise that has been the butt of the joke, for the last, 10 years or whatever. We actually, we want to be on the cutting edge, right? We want to have these initiatives with the city of Baltimore, and we've got the young prospects, and I can come out and I can come out and banter with the media, and say we're transparent, and I'll take you down to the third floor of Camden Yards, and you can go.
Sounds like such a threat.
I know.
What else happens on the third floor, John?
Right. Hey, what's that crowbar in the corner for? But he just seems like someone who has not had to do this before, and as a result, doesn't know the things to say. Like, there's a way to say you're going to be transparent without actually offering anything up. Like, he needs a crash course in ownership PR of learning how to say nothing while sounding like you're saying something.
I mean, why would he know how to do this? He's the spoiled son of a rich guy.
Right. Yeah.
Who didn't actually buy this team. We have a wave right now of inherited baseball teams, right? We have the Yankees, we have the Nationals, we have the Orioles, we have the Reds, we have the Twins, and to a lesser extent the Guardians, where Paul Dolan is not. I don't think he inherited this team necessarily, but he inherited the wealth of the Dolan family to purchase sports teams with, and I'm sure there are some that I'm forgetting. But they all have such interesting relationships to the notion that that fans and media have questions about these franchises, which, to them, they've basically just owned their whole lives, or they've inherited and have carte blanche to manifest whatever vision that they have for the team onto. But there's a deepening entrenchment among ownership, because I feel like there is a louder public conversation about how ownership behaves. Does that make sense? Owners are leaning harder into holding on to what they have, because I feel like they see more of a public fervor for holding them to account. And at the same time, the owners who are not behaving in line are exposing them more than they did in previous eras. And whether that's because of a wave of owners who actually want to compete and win, or see that there is room to win in this market where half the teams aren't really trying for whatever reason that they're claiming, or whether that is because Bud Selig ran a tighter ship than Rob Manfred, or whether that's because outside financial factors have a bigger impact on the game now than they used to. I don't really know why that is, but it feels like we have owners wearing it in public more than they used to.
Yeah, I think there's an increased visibility and accessibility of some of this younger generation of owners who, as you mentioned, have been handed a lot of this on a silver platter, and for, generations have largely gone unchecked in their power over the sport, right? And all of a sudden, there's a bit more of a combative environment where reporters and fans are less willing to take ownership claims at face value. And I think a lot of the younger owners or representatives of the team don't exactly know how to handle that. It was, Angelos going back to his dad and saying, "You didn't tell me they were going to ask about how much money we make. I didn't know I was going to have to do that." So I think it's a really interesting time to sort of be witnessing how owners are interfacing with the public, because they're forced to more than they ever have before, right? All of a sudden, we're not so comfortable just tepidly accepting that 30 billionaires can control our fate, right?
Yeah, but it's also, it comes at a weird time because, the next topic that we have here is kind of the opposite of, I wanted to talk to you about the Rob Manfred media tour that's going on right now, and that has been going on for the last 14 months, where it feels like what the league wants you to think is more cohesive than ever. I understand what Major League Baseball wants me to like about the game. I don't think those are the right things to like about the game on all instances. Some of them are. There are good people working in MLB and MLB marketing and PR who are trying to get people in on the correct things in the game. I think about the Play Loud campaign or whatever. I think about some of the work that like MLB social channels do. And I think that they're actually really good. Like, I think that the MLB social channels like TikTok and Instagram and like the videos of like behind the scenes stuff with the teams, I think that stuff is like better than other leagues, better than the NFL, better than the NBA. And those leagues might get complacent about their popularity or like the love for their sports in a way that baseball doesn't necessarily do, because they've had to make this concerted effort to make their players seem more relatable and likable because of generations of players being like boring and weird. But the league itself feels like it is messaging the same thing over and over and over again. In the last month, it's taken shape as rule changes, which we're not going to talk about any of the specifics of. But when you watch broadcasts in spring training or this year, or when you see commercials, or when you see Bryan Cranston voiceover for an ad about how the game is changing because of these rule changes, it all feels like they know what they want to say. And then at the same time, the collection of owners feel like they are less on the same page than ever. And I just feel like it's an interesting dichotomy that we're observing right now, because Rob clearly has this idea of like one baseball and getting everyone under the same umbrella and keeping everybody on message and whatnot. But he's not a strong enough commissioner to get other owners to buy into that. Like, because there was this other article that Evan Drellick wrote in The Athletic, where Manfred gave a speech at an executive luncheon in New York City, which is, I'm assuming, just like boosters or donors or whatever. And a lot of the speech focused on this idea of analytics and how it's changed the game, which again is a banned topic. But there's quotes in there from anonymous, more senior owners talking about how they don't understand why they have analytics departments and what they're doing and what it's doing for the game. So while we have Rob trying to keep everyone singing the same song in one hand, we have other owners who are like, I don't even know what analytics are. And then we have some organizations like the Rays who are like acting like they're sending a rocket to the moon. You know, like it's a lot of interesting competing thoughts right now with like the brand and the shield, like we would call it in NFL, like what MLB is right now. It's like a big question, but I found myself thinking it a lot over the last week as we've been building up towards opening day and thinking about what is going to characterize this season.
Yeah, there are a few different strands on there. Yeah, there are a few different strands in there that I think are worth pulling. But what's striking to me about the league's messaging is that, again, it is very cohesive, and I understand what they want us to like about the game, but I don't. It still feels remarkably kind of out of touch.
Performative,
right? Rob Manfred is again relaying this story to this executive luncheon that, as you mentioned, a senior owner told him, who said, I don't know what this analytics thing is. I need to figure out what the hell they do. And the owner comes back to Manfred and is like, I'm absolutely convinced that analytics is an arms race to nowhere.
Such a bar.
What does it mean?
Let's start calling things arms races to nowhere.
Yes.
Capitalism is an arms race to nowhere. All right, we're done.
I mean, yeah. And again, I know the topic of hand waving at analytics without divulging what that means is technically banned, but
yeah, but I'm not here to debate the value of analytics, and
right.
I don't think the owner really was either.
I mean, it speaks to just how out of tune a lot of owners are, and by extension, the commissioner of the sport, right? Because Manfred goes on to say, I agree with that sentiment. It's become one of my favorite lines because I think it's actually true.
As opposed to the other lines that you have to say.
Right.
I look at MLB and I don't see a league that is confident in what part of their product people are going to like. Because I see a commissioner's office who thinks that has done the market testing and thinks that they know what to put in their ads. I see some ownership groups who think that what people want is young, cost-controlled players, and they're willing to put their fans through a decade of malfeasance for the chance at doing that, which is not, I don't think, what people want.
Right.
I see other ownership groups who are like, we want to get all the good players, which I think is closer to what people want. And yet it doesn't seem to coalesce for me in making the fans feel wanted. All of these competing strands of like what is baseball in the 2020s are not melding together as a sauce yet. And it feels like, you know, different smaller communities are doing the work to vocalize and, you know, build foundations for what they like about the game. Like, you know, the people of our Slack know what they like about baseball and they can tell it to anyone and explain it very clearly. But it would not sound anything like what the actual people in charge of the sport would tell you about why you should like baseball. And I feel like that disconnect is just becoming more and more profound year over year.
I mean, what we are seeing is the plight of the billionaire, right? Which is not so concerned about the public liking your product, but is concerned with the public liking you. Right. It's like the Elon Musk condition, right? Where it's like, I'm going to tailor my product to what I think will make me the most popular, right? I'm going to come out and offer up the financial records that, you know, you say you wanted so much, right? Because I think it's going to make me look better, make our organization look better, right? We're going to put out all these, you know, communications and media like clips and all these things that talk about how great the sport is right now, you know, so like you really recognize how hard we're trying. Like, I think owners and the sports administrators are more aware than ever of just how much public opinion is maybe not in favor of them as an institution, right? Like, knowing that baseball as a sport is doing fine, but maybe people don't think that the people in charge of the sport are doing everything they could for the health of it, right? And so it's a lot of virtue signaling about like, look at us, look how hard we are trying to make the sport better for the future.
I just keep coming back to this word insecure. Like, they are trying so hard because they aren't sure about the health of the game, or they aren't sure that they know what direction to push the game in. And I don't know. I actually don't think that that's true of Rob. I actually think he knows, he has a pretty clear-eyed vision, as we are seeing with the rule changes and with
the what?
Right. I'm just going to be bleeping this out the whole time. He gave like 1 trillion interviews around the rule changes, and he was in the booth talking about them as the pitch comm went out in the Rangers and Phillies game on opening day. And they're sitting there like, oh, this is less than ideal, Commissioner. The pitch comm going out while you're in the booth, and they're calling it a disaster. It was truly great. But I think Rob has a clear-eyed vision, and it's the same technocratic approach that we've always expected Rob to have. But he doesn't really control like the long-term 2-decade health of the sport.
Right.
I mean, he has a large hand in actually enacting the strategies that the owners control, but they're governing this. Like, they're governing the direction of the sport. And to me, like, the number one thing that the league could do right now is get out of the way of the product. Just do as little as possible. Yeah. I'm being serious. I'm not even trying to be facetious. Like, the sport is in a great place because of the players and the teams and the development, and Kodai Senga having a really solid start in his first performance for the New York Mets. Really rocky first inning, but he got out of it, only giving up one run, and now he's coming out in the 6th with a solid line to get the win.
Yep.
That's why the sport is healthy. No, but actually though, like, we're in a great place with the talent, and it's fun to watch for a lot of different reasons. You know, the 16 giftable players that we drafted and the many more on our long list last week are a huge part of that. But it seems like the league is a roadblock to those people, and they would like to tell you that they are promoting them, but only at the expense of the customer. Like, you have to pay more than you ever have to be able to actually see these stars who they allegedly want you to see more than anything else in the world. And that's not getting better. It's getting worse.
Yeah. You can, however, watch minor league baseball for free through the Bally Casino app. So, promoting the health of the game.
Well, they have
that's the future, baby.
They have minor league baseball on MLB TV too. Not for free though.
Right, exactly. Hey, speaking of the minor leagues, Bobby,
Speaking of the minor leagues, we have a CBA. Did you know that they were just like bargaining like hard? I don't know how you would know. Nobody was talking about it.
Nope.
Nobody was like, hey guys, we're close.
Oh, didn't hear a damn thing.
You would have thought that somebody would have just put a little birdie in our ears, being like, get ready for this.
No, but it is here at sort of at short last. It was like the turnaround on this was kind of unreal.
Can I ask you right off the bat a hard
Yep.
question?
Yeah.
That I want to be careful about the tone that I ask it.
Okay.
How did you feel about the general vibe once the CBA tentative agreement was announced? And by that I mean the laudatory, celebratory tone of all of the people who saw that it was signed or that it was agreed to tentatively.
I mean, it's interesting because it's an interesting concept, Bobby. Because this is a historic moment in baseball history, right? Like this is something that has been overdue for decades, and as we'll get into, like contains serious improvements to lifestyle in the minor leagues, right? When it comes to pay, when it comes to housing and name, image, likeness rights, there's a whole host of things in there that minor leaguers now have that they did not have before. And I think that can't be discounted, right? Recognizing that this is really the first step, right? This is laying the groundwork for future CBAs and future negotiations, and so I think it's important to not let that moment go away. However, just because it's a CBA doesn't mean minor leaguers now have everything they need and will for the foreseeable future, right? This is still only a first step.
Yeah.
And I think for good reason, there were a lot of people who were celebrating this as finally minor leaguers have the representation that they have so long deserved. And I think that's true. And I think there's nothing wrong with celebrating that, but it's going to be really important now moving forward to stay tuned into this, right? Because there's still a lot of unknowns about how this is actually going to play out, especially with regards to the continual gutting of minor league rosters, right? Part of this agreement was the reduction of the domestic reserve roster from 180 to 165 in the regular season, down from 190 to 175 in the off season. Like, this is important, but the fight is like far from over.
Yeah. I'm not stupid. I knew there were things that were going to be in here that were not ideal. Otherwise, why would MLB be negotiating this? I knew that there were going to be steps in the wrong direction in exchange for other steps in the right direction. And that's what a CBA is. You give up things that you need because there are other things that you need more. You don't give up things that you just would like to have in a perfect world in exchange for things that you absolutely need, bare necessities, because we live under capitalism. Like we're not having all of our needs met, and so we need to give away some needs to get more core needs in our lives. And that is what a union can get you. That is what a CBA can get you, and that is what is demonstrated by this minor league agreement. Like the pay basically doubled at all levels. It's still bad. It's still not anywhere close to the value that they are providing in the aggregate,
right,
for Major League Baseball teams, and the insane surplus value that they've provided them for over 100 years.
Right. And it's still below what development leagues in other sports pay their players, right? I mean, the highest earning minor leaguer will earn $35,800 in AAA.
Right, salary wise, not
salary
signing.
Yes, yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Which is bad, but I mean, I think that those numbers also look really low, in part because they're not including the cost of housing, which was recently also agreed to be covered by Major League Baseball and is now codified in the CBA, including some improvements even to the housing policy that was instituted a year ago. I think it was a year ago, right? So, yes, the actual like bullet points of this agreement aside, it always makes me a little bit queasy to see people lauding a deal without actually knowing like how everyone feels about it, or like how the vibe of the negotiations went, or like how that fight actually played out, or who had the largest hand in constructing this deal.
Right. Like the owners are probably going to sign off on this, which tells you a little something
The owners
about
are,
it, right?
Like I think that they are grousing a little bit that they ever had this minor league thing become such a problem in the first place because of how overt and draconian and awful MLB handled this whole process since the Save America's Pastime Act. Like they really walked themselves into this problem and then just had no plan for getting themselves out of it. And then that led to creating an environment in which minor leaguers were brave enough to step up and speak out about some of these things, or were pissed off enough, or were desperate enough to speak out about some of these things. And, you know, we should say 99% of the people who voted on this CBA voted yes. So that would lead you to believe that there is harmony over the contents of it. Otherwise, that number would not be so high. I don't think that we've seen the number of the percentage of people who actually voted on it compared to how many minor leaguers there are. So that doesn't mean that 99% of all minor leaguers voted yes on this. That means that 99% of people who actually responded and voted in the time frame that they gave, which was very short. I think it was like 3 days that they had to vote on this, which is too short in my personal opinion. All that being said, more than anything, the thing that I always think about with regards to a CBA is, does this make people's lives better tomorrow? Does this make the material conditions of the union members' lives better the second you sign it? And this
is without a doubt.
Clearly does.
It makes them better yesterday, right? They're getting back pay for spring training.
Yes, and for retroactive to the actual start of the season, depending on when the owners actually ratify it. So, you know, and I know that the people who were involved in negotiating and pushing for this union drive think about it in that way too, because we've literally talked to the people who were involved in it, you know, and they've expressed that same sentiment. So I don't think that this is certainly not like a bad deal, because this is clearly the deal that was available to them with the resources that they have in the disadvantaged position that they have been forced into for decades and decades and decades. I just kind of like lament the unbalanced nature of the industry.
Yeah.
Still, even after seeing this, like, I think that you and I had like pie in the sky visions for what a unionized minor leagues looked like. And this was not the vision,
right,
for me personally, because number one, I didn't expect MLBPA to come in and include them into their union. I think it was good that they did, because I think that it expedited this process and it gave them the necessary resources in order to actually like get a deal and organize and push for this and actually win a union drive, which is insanely hard to do, especially when people are scared for losing their jobs like you can be at the minors. But in my head, I always was expecting it to be like, this would have been a different organization effort, which would have led it to be more confrontational, which at its nature might have yielded a different looking CBA. But there's no guaranteeing that would have ever happened. And so like, this is not me holding anyone at fault here. This is just me kind of reckoning with the fact that, you know, even after all it took to get this CBA to a point where it's a realistic possibility and all of the wins along the way that led to it, it's still like owners are like, we're doing you a favor by paying you $35,000 a year. That just kind of sucks.
Yeah. I mean, this is going to cost teams roughly $3 million a year, which that's not just not very much money. You know, that whole thing about how paying minor leaguers more would like maybe mean the death of the sport because they can't afford it. It turns out that was a lie.
Yeah. And the flip side of this coin, right, is like they unionized and they doubled their salaries in the span of like 3 months. You know,
right.
like there are so many positives to take away from this.
Is, I mean, and
I'm
that's
just
my thing is like, I mean, it would have been amazing if they had come out and, you know,
everybody's making $100K.
I mean, yeah, of course, right? That was never going to happen. And I think, like, again, knowing the precarity of minor leaguers' situations, I think expecting them to be really militant, it was just not in the cards, right? I mean, they just doubled everyone's pay basically overnight. Right. And that's huge. And there's accommodations for families, and they are getting some of the ancillary benefits of being represented by the MLBPA, right? With like having nutritionists and being able to get a second medical opinion if you need, right? And being covered by the drug testing fucking law
Agreement. Yeah.
agreement. That's
The joint
the word.
agreement. And they also get name, image, and likeness
And they get
back.
name, image, and likeness back, which is. I mean, there are a lot of minor leaguers who can't do very much with that, but also none of them have ever had it. Right?
Yeah.
Major League Baseball has always, as Michael Bauman, friend of the pod, deftly pointed out in the pages of Fangraphs, it was this interesting double-edged sword of you are not worth enough to be paid commensurate to your value because you don't provide very much, but you provide just enough that we're going to hold on to your rights so that we can do what we want with it, right? So it's amazing that something like that has like finally been wiped out. I think my biggest worry moving forward is I don't want fans and the public to sort of lose that energy that we've had over the last 6 months or so, right? Like there are still improvements to be made and there's still going to be confrontations down the road. And I want people to be just as amenable to those fights, those changes, as they are right now, because they're still important.
That's very well put, because I look at the CBA, like you said, as a good first step. That when it expires, maybe the existence of it takes some of the ill will out of how minor leaguers feel for how they've been treated for so long. But I think that when it expires, there are many things that will be worth revisiting. And it's the same trap that we get ourselves into with the Major League CBA, where fans, the media, the wider reaction to something is like, thank God there's baseball back, or like, thank God this XYZ condition was improved. And it's like, well, the point of a CBA is that it pauses the fight. It doesn't end the fight. It's not just in perpetuity, you come back every 5 years and you sign this thing again. Like in 5 years from now, they should look at this document and they should say, okay, starting point, but we want to improve every single part of it. And like maybe I'm strawmanning a little bit, but like the tone of the reaction to the news that there was a CBA was a little bit like, thank God we got that problem behind us. And I think that that's a dangerous mindset.
Yeah, famously, unions' work is done once they get their first CBA. Like I don't think any union has ever had to struggle beyond that point.
Hopefully we were able to talk to some of the people that were involved in this deal and ask some questions about what the process was like, because I feel like we don't have a big window into what actually happened. With the Major League CBA, it was like we got videos of everybody walking back and forth every time there was a new proposal. And with this one, it was like we just found out that they were even bargaining like a month ago. And then we just got news dumped that we had a CBA. So there's still a lot of questions.
Yep, I agree. Damn, dude, the miners are unionized.
It's pretty cool.
That's fucking crazy.
The one thing that I feel bad for not having mentioned yet too is that they now officially have a grievance process. Like before, the only way for them to get any kind of legal recompense for anything that a team was doing to them was to literally sue them and either take it to a class action lawsuit or go to court by yourself against the team that is currently employing you and say you violated XYZ law and hope that the judge sides with you. And now what they have is a grievance process built legally into the CBA where if they feel like a team is running afoul of what they've agreed to, they can grieve it, and then a neutral arbiter will look at this document and vote on whether or not MLB is violating this document. And that is like so much easier than suing your employer in court for so many reasons, because like they now have the resources of the union to file this grievance with, and the lawyers that are employed by MLBPA, and a document that they can actually point to that is not a law that might change in the time span that you are actually suing the team. Like there are so many different things that make this so much easier and better that just by nature of a CBA going into effect immediately improves people's lives.
Yeah. We'll see. You want to ban this one from the pod too? Just get it out of the way.
What else can we ban? Should we ban the Mets and the A's?
Probably for our own sake.
I think that does it for this week. Is this a short pod or is this just a normal pod? And we've just been doing such long ones recently.
I don't know, but the pace of play stuff that we implemented seemed to have worked. So
we actually have a set of rules that's pasted to the wall in the studio that if you violate it, you have to get out. Is talking about pace of play allowed? I guess pace of play is not a rule change.
Right. Well, I was talking about our own rule changes too.
That would be a good pod. Rule changes for the podcast. Things you're no longer allowed to do.
Don't ban relevant topics from discussion.
Your first rule change for the pod. Don't ask me to do the transatlantic accent. Have you checked in with your man JJF recently? Did you send him a text congratulating him on the opening day win? And the crowd at opening day, 27,000.
27,000.
That's pretty good. That's 20,000 more than their best game last year.
Ouch. Harsh. Fair. No, it's been a little bit actually. I mean, I did check in on him for some research I was doing for the next Patreon newsletter. There's going to be some fascinating little tidbits in there.
Look at that teaser.
Look at that teaser.
You're already working on the newsletter? You're doing
right?
research for the newsletter already.
I was doing it last week.
A week in advance.
Mm-hmm.
That is really special stuff out of you. Wow.
Yep.
So you're raising the bar this year, huh?
Well, it's going to make it even more embarrassing when it's still a week late.
You're like doing a Shaq and Kobe thing with me right now. You're like, I'm already doing research for the newsletter. Yeah. You're like, Shaq's coming into camp out of shape. You're not doing research for the newsletter a week in advance.
Patreon.com/tipping pitches. That's that. Don't put the back. Again, it'll still work, but we will get roasted for it.
Don't put it. It will change in the address bar automatically, but still, don't put it. Don't you dare.
You'll feel stupid.
3 different tiers: $5, $7, $12. They all get you different stuff. You can see what they get you on the website. You know, you can also call it Tipping Pitches. You can call it Tipping Pitches, and you can just speak your mind, share your thoughts, your takes, your observations from opening day, your ups, your downs, your lefts, your rights, anything that you want to talk about. 785-422-5881. I'm saying it slower because sometimes I listen back to the pod and I listen at 1.5 speed and I'm just like, that was a bunch of numbers and I don't know any of them. I mean, I know the number, but like if
you're the guy reading the medical warnings at the end of like a Tylenol commercial or something.
You are legally allowed to call Tipping Pitches. The number is 785-422-5881.
That was really good.
Thank you.
Look, we've banned discussion between us regarding rules and analytics and such on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't banned the listeners. I'm just putting it out there.
Interesting.
We may not be able to respond.
This is like a real living document of a of a concept.
Mm-hmm.
The banned topics. Last week, we let Stephen and Becca talk about it.
Right.
And we kind of responded, but you and I didn't discuss it between the two of us. So it's kind of unclear, you know? There's a lot of gray area in these laws.
Yeah. Like with MLB's rules, you know, again, it's whatever your heart feels like.
Some might say there's not enough gray area in MLB's rules. I don't know if I would say that, and I don't know if I would say it to you on the Tipping Pitches podcast. But if you catch me offline, I might have some thoughts about it. You can also email the pod, tippingpitchespod@gmail.com. Anything else, Alex, that you would like to, predict for the 2023 season?
I'd like to predict.
Well, I saw the annual Spin magazine where they talk to every musician who's a baseball fan, like literally there's like 150 respondents on that. Yeah. It's like a 30,000 word article. I'm just getting my editing thoughts out right now. It's like by the end of it, I was like, I don't know who any of these people are, but they like the Twins.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. I saw on there that all of those musicians were willing to go on the record with predictions for how their teams would do. Number predictions. So I was wondering if you would like to weigh in, musician that you are.
That's a good point. I think the A's shock the world and win 65 games this year.
Oh, you know what we forgot to talk about? Bryce Harper saying that he reads romance novels.
Yeah. You were asking for that 2-hour pod. Here it is.
You're just going to go for another hour? All right, get it out. Have you read any of these books?
I haven't.
Have you heard of L. Kennedy? I haven't either.
I actually have. Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
That's
Where?
That's the extent. I don't know. TikTok, probably.
Oh, great.
But it seems that, we've bandied about the idea of the Tipping Pitches book club. And while I think that that concept at first was like, maybe let's read baseball books, I kind of like the idea of Bryce Harper's book club. Let's read what Bryce is reading.
I'm obsessed with the fact that he said this to GQ.
Yeah.
First of all, the growth of Bryce Harper. There's no way he would have said something like this 5 years ago.
No.
Number one. Number two.
It's not very alpha male of him.
I thought that this book would be like, okay, it's like an airport romance novel, but it's like, it has like a crime plot or like something like that.
Nope.
And I went to it and it's just two hockey players that fall in love.
Are you surprised?
And it's
Are
like,
you surprised?
It's like a horny book too. Like,
Right.
It's not just like they fell in love, here's their sweet love story. It's like, it's
Steamy.
saucy.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm so proud of Bryce. The growth. Oh, I finally found what I was looking for. Taking Back Sunday's John Nolan saying that he wasn't sure what the baseball gods would have in store for the New York Mets this season because, he's a Mets fan. He's been a Mets fan his whole life from Long Island. Very up and down experience to be a Mets fan. And then they asked him for how many games they thought that he thought the Mets would win. And he said, I don't know, probably 110. Come on, John Nolan.
That's baseball brain right there.
Is it? Is that baseball brain or is that I feel like they play 200 games, so I'm just going to predict 110?
Right.
There's no way. There's no way he's like that. There's no way he knows that that's only 6 away from the record, right? Because you don't predict that. There's no way. Like Steve would not have predicted that the Blue Jays are going to win 110 games, even though he feels really good about them. He's in here talking about the Blue Jays as he always is.
Yeah.
Really wringing his hands over them. Like, Steve, it's going to be okay,
It's gonna
dude.
be all right.
It's going to be all right. 110 games. John Nolan, New York Mets. You heard it first.
It could happen.
If the Mets win 110 games this year, will you allow me to put your MakeDamnSure cover in the podcast?
Sure. Yes.
Really?
I'll agree to that right now.
Really?
Yep.
Handshake.
Handshake.
All right, we're shaking
Do it.
hands. It's real. It's real.
Yep.
It's real. I'm going to take a photo of this moment.
Uh-huh. Now we're just holding hands.
It has been written that if the New York Mets win 110 games this year, MakeDamnSure, Alex Baisley's version
12 years old, baby.
is playing on the podcast. This is the best day of my life. Now
you have something to root
I'm
for.
back in on the Mets. God, now I'm going to watch every single game this year. This is great. This is the best thing ever. We need to do more bets like this.
This is great. Amazing.
Okay. I don't think we can top that, so I think we should just wrap up there. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We will be back next week.
I just wanna break you down so badly in the worst way.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Rodriguez. Tipping Pitches.
Tipping pitches.
This is the one that I love the most.
Tipping pitches.
So we'll see you next week. See ya!